So hopefully you managed to untangle them. But the point of the exercise really was to think about there are many, many different ways of engaging, lots of kinds of engagement, and it's really important to think about being precise when you decide how you're going to engage with people and what the purpose and what the end of that engagement is. And of course, it's the engagement that leads to the impact, the real world change. So, when we're thinking about engagement and impact in the Valuing Voices team, there are some key areas that we've focused on. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Valuing Voices, we're a project that's a research culture project kind of aimed at breaking down hierarchies and those barriers in research culture that stop people from thriving and doing their best work. And in relation to the principle of engagement and impact, we've been thinking a lot about different ways of doing research, the extent of the research team, and how we move research beyond the academic setting to make that real world change. So that's things like thoughtful co-production, when you have to build trust with those that you want to work with, and co-producing research questions right from the very beginning with the community's understanding need and meeting that need with your research. And that can take a long time. And it can be hard work. We're also thinking about fair attribution and ownership of research. So when you've done that really important engagement and you towards the outputs of the research, how are you attributing those who've contributed to it? And we have some frameworks for that on the tool itself. So things like making sure that everybody's name who's contributed to a journal article goes on at the end, but also really acknowledging the knowledge holders in the community that you've worked with in various ways, and thinking about making things open access, and being really careful about how we resource and acknowledge that. We're thinking about that broad engagement beyond academia, so how you translate your research to the world and ensure that you're reaching audiences beyond the academy in order to make real world change, all of this engagement to lead to impact through research that understands and meets the need of those who will benefit from it. And we're aware that, as I've kind of touched on, these areas are difficult, and the onus is not just on the researcher themselves. We're working with funders to think about the lead-in times that are needed for projects and to actually build that trust with communities that allows them to share knowledge. Where we have we're also thinking about the professional services staff who enable knowledge exchange and ensuring that support is there for researchers at the university, and we'll come to that later in the session. So those are kind of the high level definitions, but what do we really mean? Because there are lots of ways that you can engage by starting small. And that's what we want to say to you, really, that it can be done. Start small. Talking to people is how it begins. Having conversations with people outside of your usual peer group, your department, your school, but talking to people and translating your research to different groups of people. So how can you pitch your research to audiences who are not experts? And how does that in turn change and reformulate your own ideas? And that can be a really useful way of just turning over the problems and thinking about how people respond and might gain something from what you're doing. Which brings me to the second point of gaining those perspectives on your work. So gathering people's feedback, but listening to the kinds of questions that they ask, meeting people where they are, and gathering responses, which then can inform the shape of your research going forward. And, you know, that can be in so many different contexts, from your immediate family to kind of those you really want to work with, like such as, you know, doctors or specific community groups. And then once you've sort of really worked through those conversations, it's about keeping on talking to the people that you want to work with. So where are you going to keep the conversations going? Because engagement is resource intensive, and it's about thinking through what you want to achieve in the end, and how you're going to get there. That's really important at the beginning of this kind of work. And then working with people to create the impact. So how do you build relationships? Do you do that equitably? But also realistically, and with the kind of achievables in mind, and being transparent and having those conversations with partners about how you can work together in order to create that impact. So why would you do all of this if it's such hard work? Well, at Valuing Voices, and I know many people in the impact world and beyond, and many researchers think that it's valuable. Research is credible, we think, when you engage with those who are affected by and interested in it. And that means it's trustworthy, it's authentic, it's useful, and it's genuinely helpful. Not just to the research community, but to people who have a stake in that research, who are interested in it, who will gain from the knowledge transfer, but also whose lives will be potentially transformed or changed by that research. And that's a really important and central purpose to why we do what we do. So I'll pass over to Karen to talk a little bit more about how we engage.
Oh, thanks, Lucy. So, yeah, as Lucy says, you want to engage, you want to create that impact, and the central question really is, who should you talk to make your research, relevant to the real world, and ultimately having an impact on that real world. So here are some questions that you should definitely ask yourself. So who should help to design your research questions? Who will be affected by them? Which non-academic partners and participants will enrich your research? Who will have completely different views, perhaps, or a different viewpoints on what you're doing? Who will benefit from hearing your findings? These are all crucial. And even, if you're years away from having any findings, thinking about that early is really important, so that you can sort of prepare for it and build up to it. So thinking about who those people should be is, that's for example, in the trials unit where I work, your trials unit, we talk about medical research. So it's quite straightforward. You have your patients, your patient population has a certain makeup, and so you try to talk to people who fit in that makeup to get different perspectives. But it's not always as easy. For example, I've worked on public health trials where it's the public. Who is that? So you may have to get a bit more creative in finding people. For example, go out to community centers in different places where you might find different people with different backgrounds and things like that. But it's definitely important to hear those voices. Now, yeah. So engagement and getting to that impact is essentially about having meaningful conversations to get new perspectives. But we also know that researchers struggle quite a bit with finding the right people, and they struggle with the facilitations. And both of these are really important because it's also about giving people equal opportunity to have a voice in research. So. How to engage equitably. Here are a few considerations. So think about that. This is the approach that I always think about the 6 degrees of separation. So the idea that anybody is the 6 steps removed from you in your network. So think about who can introduce you to whom, and what connections do you already have? Maybe strong connections, but also weak connections can help. Maybe introduce you to people who can introduce you to other people to ultimately, get to the kinds of groups you want to talk to. And going through your networks is really important, because as researchers, we often don't get much time to build up that trust, which is all important especially when you're talking to people, to members of the public. So it's sort of a shortcut to get to the right people. Once you find people, go the extra mile to accommodate them. There's not everybody wants to be in an online discussion group. So, you know, offer to talk one-on-one, offer to come and see them in person, whatever it takes. So as Lucy said, meet them where they're at. The use of plain English is really important. I think we often don't realize, how much expertise we have, and that with that expertise comes certain words and phrases. So it's really important that you use language everybody can understand, and also to ask questions that people can answer. That means that sometimes you have to break down your questions for people, and then, based on the feedback, you can put it back together. Make engagement mutually beneficial. What we see in medical research that people, especially if they've had life-changing conditions, they're really motivated to help researchers. And even though we pay them, pay is usually not the main motivations. But there's also always surprising reasons for getting involved in research too. Like one person said, she really wanted to be on the panel because she was using it as a way to combat loneliness. So there's sometimes very unexpected benefits for people. And the last sort of tip or consideration is that you should look for opportunities for long-term engagement. I mean, that's something that funders say, but it's not always hard to do. But I do think if you have people who want to help you, that's really valuable. And if you can in some way keep them engaged, keep talking to them, that's really valuable. So I just want to quickly touch on one example of a study, a project we visited in Thailand. This was with our partners in Thailand who we're running the Valuing Voices project with. This project gave us a lot of just food for thought of how they engage with the community, and how they work towards impact. So as you can see on your left side, we are there visiting a farmer, a rice farmer. And this farmer was, like his neighbors, they farmed rice in an area of great biodiversity. And the researchers, they wanted to protect this biodiversity, but of course it's also the livelihood of these farmers. So they've been working long term. They'd already been working 13 years with these farmers to find ways to both protect the biodiversity and increase the yield of the rice. And what really struck me was that one of the researchers, the lady who was leading this, she just said slowly. They felt they really had to go at the pace of the community rather than the researchers to get to where they wanted, because the farmers, they'd farmed that land for generations. They had their own approaches. They were also in a position where they could not afford to lose a crop. So by working with community leaders such as the person in this picture at the head of the table, then adopting the new approach to farming, then looking at the results scientifically, what is the yield, what's the quality of the rice, and so on and so forth. Then step by step, they were trying to convince others in the community to work that way. So what it made us realize was just how integral the engagement was in this project, and how central to eventually creating impact. So yeah, we've reflected on this quite a bit as to, how central can you make engagement in other research, because this was such a great example. So it's, all this shows that it's quite difficult to do engagement well, but luckily we have help at University of York. We have lots of help to help you think about who you should involve, to find ways to connect with people. So I'm happy to introduce Rachel Cunningham, who's from the involvement at York, who's going to tell us a little bit about the work they do.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me to come along today. Can I just check you can hear me okay? Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much. And it's really good to hear of the work Valuing Voices has done. I haven't been anywhere half as exotic as Thailand, but a local community centre is good enough. I just want to tell you a little bit about the involvement at York team at the University of York that is here to help you make it easier to work with members of the public. And I think many of our principles align with those that you've heard with Valuing Voices. Some very important words like working together, working with, acknowledging, conversations and trust you've heard already, and that's very much the principles that we're built on as well. And we've worked hard to develop our expertise and understand the public involvement landscape to support your research, to give you advice and guidance on working with members of the public. Next slide, please. I'll introduce who we are first of all. So I'm Rachel and I'm the Project Support Officer on the team, and our team is led by Hannah Gray, who is the Head of Public Involvement and Participatory Research at the University of York. We're a very small team with a very large reach, and we cover the whole of the university, all research areas, not confined to trials or health and social care, but anyone can approach us for support. And we're really championing public involvement to be part of all research across all faculties. No small ask there, but hopefully we will grow. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about what we do and what we mean by public involvement. We've seen earlier on that there were lots of different ways to engage the public, and public involvement was one of those, which is quite specific in working with members of the public throughout your research cycle. And within that, there are lots of different ways to do public involvement as well. And our team covers all of those approaches. You may hear words like co-production, co-design, co-develop, co-author. There are more co's. What's common with all of them is the co-bit, collaboration and working with, and that's really important. And you'll find it called different things in different settings. And the participatory approaches are even more inclusive and equitable, and sharing the research decisions and research responsibility, and really working together as all researchers, whether that's academic or community or peer researchers. And it really maximizes the participation of the communities and members of the public in that research. How do we do this? Well, as you say, we are a really small team and we just work hard to support public involvement activities. We're very much a hands-on team. We respond to requests for support and can help at any stage of the research process. So we can help find public contributors, as was mentioned earlier. Trying to find people to engage with is the key step in getting people on board, and getting them on board early so that you can understand their perspectives, the relevance right from the beginning, and design your research to include those ideas. We have a network of connections within the university and beyond where we can reach and engage with people. And we have something called the Involvement at York Register, which is a list of over 100 people now who have signed up, who are keen and willing and ready to get involved in projects at the university. We maintain a connection with them with a fortnightly email where we share opportunities and other news relevant to this research area, and people sign up to whatever takes their fancy. And then within a project team, it will be chosen which ones they would like to include to ensure a diverse group with varied experience and voice coming through. The Involvement at York Register won't meet every research project's requirements, and we may have to do a more targeted approach if there's a specific community or a specific research area. You may want to use connections with local community groups or charities or national networks to help recruit people to engage with in this way. So we work lots with other people as well. Next slide, please. So I think from everything that's been said before, why is this important? And this is a statement by the Chief Medical Officer, but it can apply to all research and not just medical research. And no matter how complicated the research or brilliant the researcher, patients and the public always offer unique, invaluable insights. Their advice when designing, implementing, and evaluating research invariably makes studies more effective, more credible, and more cost efficient as well. And I think that really sums it up, and it's a good foundation on which to base involvement. And when we're thinking about engagement and impact, making that relevant to the people that are affected by the research can really be improved by public involvement throughout the whole research process. Having the perspective of members of the public, people who have a different experience, a different level of expert knowledge, but just as valuable, can add to the impact of the research at the end. And it's an intrinsic part of citizenship, doing things right, and is open to being accountable and transparent as well. So the benefits are acknowledged in that research that includes members of the public is more impactful at the end. And the public involvement groups can help identify where your research should be given out to, who to reach with it, and in a way that makes people understand it more. And, you know, lots of funders are now not only encouraging but mandating public involvement in their studies. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we can help you is the Involvement at York web pages have an online resource library. This is very much a moving, not a static thing, and we will constantly be updating and adding to it as time goes on. But this has resources, links to planning tools. It has forms that can help you undertake public involvement, so information sheets, guidance, forms particularly related to payment, reward and recognition, links to the payment policy regarding that. There's also forms on there, a project support request form, where if you've got a research project and you'd like some help from us around that, you can submit that form and we'll get back to you. And if you want to share an opportunity with our register members, there's a form to complete for that as well. And it has other resources on too. So take a look, play around. If there's anything missing, let us know. But it's a useful resource available to all at the University of York. Final slide. Most importantly, how to contact us. There are forms, but we're happy to receive emails asking for advice or guidance, and there's more information available on our web pages. As a team, we like to talk. it was mentioned conversations are really important, and this is where conversations come into their own as well. So we're very friendly and always happy to help. That's it.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. I don't think we need much more convincing that you know it is such an integral part of how research is done, and you know the support that's here for you is excellent. So thank you, and thanks for signposting. Just to signpost as well that there is a lot of excellent support available at York. Linda Coferigno, the University Impact Manager, is here, so thank you for being here, Linda. Linda and the faculty impact managers and coordinators and administrators in your faculty are all there to help and support you with your impact plans. They can support with evaluation as well. Yes, of course, there's the looming ref, but we're really thinking that we're talking about impact as something that's integral to doing good research, that is something that's kind of business as usual, but that there's lots of support at the university. You should have a copy of the slides. We'll send them out again, but there's some links on there as well. There's the support for research impact at York, the University of York web pages, but also Amy Newman, who's moved to a new role now, but has put together a fantastic Google site with lots of information on impact support and resources to signpost to internally. And you'll find, you know, all the information you need there. So I'd really highlight that as something to use. If you need to look for support or just information. Resources. There's also the Valuing Voices resources, which is, I guess, sort of why we're here today. So aside from this training and training on the tool, we run another session, which is about facilitation skills, and it's called For Better Meetings, but really a lot of those skills translate well to workshops with stakeholders, and also just facilitating conversations with different groups that you want to include in your research. There's lots of hands-on techniques there, like ways of reaching consensus, dealing with challenging conversations, bringing everyone in to the conversation. So we're running those for the duration of this semester, and we can send you details on that. And we'll also have the Valuing Voices tool, which you will be able to get up now as we're going to kind of move into the next part of the session and have a look at the tool and how it might support you in your engagement and impact planning as well. So the web address is on the screen. There's also a QR code where you would be able to get to it from there. So I'll give you just a second, and if you are able to juggle the tabs, do log in. We'll put the website in the chat as well, and then I will move into the tool once that's there and have a look. Oh, okay, hopefully you've had a chance to log on. So the Valuing Voices tool is sort of central to our project and what we've been trying to achieve. And there are 5 principles for equitable and responsible research on there. But of course, we're concentrating on engagement and impact today. So you can click into the principle, and there's lots of information. There's definitions, ones that you've seen today, and then ones that expand on what we've talked about. But really key, there's a resources tab next to the definitions. And Karen and I have spent a long time, a good proportion of our role, kind of sifting through different resources for engagement and impact that are out there, with a real focus on equity, because that's really central to our project. And we've tried to pick resources that are as practical as possible. So these should be resources that help you be time effective, you know, and enable you to practice the principle in a project rather than, you know, kind of abstract conceptual resources, although there are some deeper reads on there. So this is a fantastic toolkit the ACU Equitable Research Partnerships Toolkit. Lots of really practical tips for running workshops and guides. It's a very comprehensive resource for actually how you talk to people and how you build partnerships equitably. So I can recommend that. There's also a very good resource on civic engagement, which is somewhere, it must be on the next page, but anyway, building civic engagement in equitable ways, which I can highly recommend, and we'll highlight those in the follow-up email. But there's lots on there, so do have a look, do have a look through. Don't suffer in silence, and as we've said, there's lots of people to talk to as well. So the idea with the tool is that once you've looked through the definition of the principle, how to think about how it might relate to your own research, and had a look through the resources to potentially gather some ideas of how you put that into practice. There's a planning work exercise at the end of that. And essentially there's 4 questions, some of which I have filled in from my own research on here. There's 4 questions that follow a results-based planning method, meaning that you start with the end in mind. You think about the vision and the ambition of what you want engagement and impact to look like in your project. So that might be reaching certain communities, that might be, improving the research itself in different ways, that real ambition of what successful engagement and impact looks like. And then you work down through the detail of that, thinking about the outputs, those kind of processes you need to make that happen, and then moving down into the activities, that day-to-day planning that you need to achieve what you want to do in detail. And then to think about the resources that you need. And of course, that's really key when it comes to engagement and impact. You think about how are we going to make sure that we're remunerating participants, where we've got that kind of covered, and that you've built some support for that into the project itself. So that is the results-based planning on the tool, and now I think we're going to move into actually having a go at that yourselves. So I will just hand over to Karen to set up the exercise.
Sorry, I went to the wrong view. I can't see your screen, Lucy.
Can anybody else, or has it stopped sharing? Right, bear with me 1 second, my apologies. There we go. Can you see that now? That should be visible now.
Yes. So what we thought we'd do is give you a little bit of time today to practice with the tool. So we have put together an example project that should be understandable to everybody, regardless of your research background. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in breakout rooms of 3 and 4 to try to work through the questions together. So as Lucy said, the big questions: what does success look like for engagement and impact in your work, all the way to what are the resources we need to make that happen. And we know from experience that first question, what does success look like, is sometimes quite hard for researchers to answer, because you're used to thinking in sort of outputs and actions. So I think sometimes it helps to sort of let go of sort of the nitty gritty of the real world and think and dream big, basically, and then come down to, okay, but how would this actually work? How would this actually work in real life? We will have this example project available to you in the chat, and also the 4 questions available in the chat. But if you need any help while you're in the breakout room, Lucy and I are going to be here, and just put a note in the chat, and we can quickly drop in. I'll give you about